You're
I can
really
sign up for
low
this.
compared to John. You're low compared to Matt on my end.
From an audio perspective,
Yeah.
okay.
Are you
So we
hearing
can
him?
fix that.
Are you hearing us equally, Matt?
No, you're a lot louder, Rob.
I mean, we know Clint can fix it, but
Yeah, I don't want him bitching at me though. Right, Clint?
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Necro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union.
This episode is brought to you by Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training, the makers of the SIRT pistol. Mike Hughes and Britt Lentz are rock stars, and you can be too if you train with a SIRT. TheGunfood.com, your online source for ammunition. Mountain Man Medical, the right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Pressers. I'm Matt Mallory, your host, and this is my guest co-host, Rob Pincus. Rob, how the heck you been?
good, man. Busy. What is this? This is the fall, the mid-fall, I guess, of 2022. And the tour season for me normally ends by September 1st. And this year, I feel like November 1st was the end of the training tour year. It was a really busy September and October.
Nice.
And to include some time with our friend Clint in where we were. I bumped into him somewhere. And then
don't you hate that you're so busy everywhere? You're like, where was I? Where am I now? Wait,
because that wasn't Pennsylvania, but I was somewhere, and I was with John, Mr. Snow, as well down in Florida just about a month ago, probably.
Yeah, I want to be down there in a couple months. Just get away from New York, the New York snow. Wait,
I hear you. Yeah,
not that snow.
Fun snow. It's not like good Colorado snow.
It's not like the good snow we have on the show. Anyway.
Well, exactly. You know, as Mr. Snow living in Florida, that was clearly a good decision.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So Rob, why don't you introduce our guest? Tell us all about him, and then we'll let him fill in any gaps.
Yeah, so John goes by Mr. Snow online and in the 3D printing community, the gun making community at large, really. And he is one of the most, how do I put this? One of the friendliest, one of the most prolific designers now. I mean, this guy is every other week. We were just joking about it in the pre-show. You know, if you just say, hey, could you print, or does anybody do a design for? Within days, you're going to see a prototype, maybe within hours of something. This guy, who I met, I don't know, 2.5 years ago now, maybe just over 2 years ago, has been just one of the true leaders. One of the great things about the 3D community and the gun building community is that it's very much a decentralized, disjointed bunch of enthusiasts and hobbyists, most of whom are obviously a little bit counterculture and a lot of it anti-authoritarian. So it doesn't really lend itself to hierarchy, which is nice. If someone is being trusted and somebody's being listened to, and people are going to somebody for, advice or will this work, won't this work, they've probably earned it through their actions. And I think that's definitely true of Mr. Snow. So with that, Mr. Snow, what brings you to the show tonight? What are you excited to talk about?
Oh, well, I mean, just 3D printing in general, I think we don't have a lot of that. It's still, as you said, kind of a counterculture underground thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've had a lot of help bringing what is possible in the 3D printing community with the documentary from Vice and, groups like Popular Front that had that documentary on Jay Stark that kind of really blew open this world of what was possible with the average desktop 3D printer in today's world for the Second Amendment folks out there is incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Matt, do you have a lot of experience with 3D printed stuff in the gun world?
I don't, none at all. Actually, it's kind of why I reached out to you, Rob, because I'm interested to get into it. Just like red dot sights, RDSs, when they came on the scene so many years ago, rifles, and now it's kind of like becoming a more common thing. 3D printing is becoming quite more common than anybody would have thought. It's like the Bill Gates, like, yeah, it's really not going to take off, but then everybody's got a computer in their home. I'm thinking, it's funny when you first started talking about John, two things came to mind: necessity breeds invention, and ideas are a dime a dozen. Those two things came to mind, and I think that that summarizes, John, and somebody gives him an idea, and he turns it into something, right? And that's obviously
One of the nice things
their
about
necessity.
3D printing is that I think that old adage, right? Like ideas are a dime a dozen, and I don't know if there was ever an official ending to that, but the implication being you got to invest a lot of money to get a thing, right? So you've got an idea, but until you really put the work in and put money in, particularly, you're not going to have an object. 3D printing changes that. So it may not be a dime a dozen, but it's not much more than a dime a piece for a lot of the things you're going to put out of a printer. They're useful.
You can get into the hobby of 3D printing for as little as $200, with the most common prolific printer in the space being the Ender 3. If you're blessed to live near a micro center in that southern United States, occasionally they even have them on sale for as little as $100. To have a $100 machine that is capable of printing Glock frames, that is capable of printing your 80% polymer jigs, which are hard to come by these days, a little bit harder than they once were. It's phenomenal what the opportunities open. AR-15s, AKs, even. It's amazing.
50 BMG.
And
there is one 50 BMG design out there.
And I've shot it. It's kind of cool. It's the frame that integrates with obviously a traditionally manufactured chamber and barrel and bolt, but it's pretty cool. We actually have a micro center out here in Denver too, spreading.
So now the $200 Ender 3, that's not going to print metal. You're not going to be able to print, because you can have 3D printers like printing metal parts, right?
You can. One of the most common ways to do that is actually, there's a couple different ways to do that, but metal printers at this point are still outside of the common consumer price range.
I would imagine.
It's just not going to happen yet. So as close as you're going to get to, some of the carbon fiber nylons, which you can actually print on a $300 or $400 machine, have equivalent properties to that of aluminum in terms of their strength. Don't have the same heat resistance properties as aluminum, but it's very, very close.
That's so interesting. That's awesome. So what things, we talked about some of the different types of guns, but what kind of parts do you foresee, or do you guys know of any companies that are doing 3D printing of polymer plastic for their guns just to save costs? Because I can imagine, back in the day, you'd have these stamp pieces of metal or whatever, or you'd have some kind of molded piece of plastic that's put into some machine that's got a mold. And, those machines are very expensive, and you're not going to turn them out. I would imagine that a 3D printer is going to take longer than a molded machine, if you will, but cost-wise, it's got to be a totally drastically different cost to get started, and then also to kick out product.
Well, all the major gun manufacturers are without a doubt using 3D printing in their prototyping. So if you want to come up with a new design and try it out, see what it feels like, 3D printing is the best way to get that quickly with very little cost. SIG is 3D printing some suppressors. Now, those are metal 3D printers. And the thing about 3D printing is 3D printing can manufacture things that simply cannot be done in subtractive traditional machining. 3D printers can make parts and shapes that genuinely aren't possible from traditional manufacturing means. But I don't know of any real companies out there mass marketing significant 3D printed firearms at this point. It is very interesting to me that Beretta has entered entered their toe in the water with a shotgun that has 3D printable customized side plates. So instead of spending thousands of dollars on these detailed engraved Beretta shotguns that are just beautiful works of art, you can still buy your $3,000 Beretta shotgun and print your own side plates at your flavor of the day. We're definitely seeing manufacturers start to move towards catering to that community.
That's
I
cool.
have to say that to me it's a real stretch to say that move is even flirting with.
Oh, in the water.
It's barely acknowledging the 3D printing
Yeah.
community. Like, you don't know your audience if that's acknowledging the 3D printing community, that here's a $3,000 shotgun that if you want, you can 3D print a 12-cent duck scene on the side of. Like,
It sounds.
I mean,
I mean,
it's not a press release, but
yeah,
man.
it sounds like they're, they're flirting with it, as you were saying, just to try to, maybe if they had what they might be thinking is somebody who has the printer that wants to mass produce it to get different types out there and other revenues or other ways to get the buzz and stuff about it, or just to be the first, first company. I mean, there's always that, even though it's
We
minuscule.
do see a lot of companies out there selling accessories. There is an entire cottage industry of home-based businesses selling parts kits, so bolts and screws,
Mm.
and a lot of companies are also selling things like grips and vertical foregrips and angled foregrips and accessories like that. There's a ton of that stuff out there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and there's also, where we're starting to see movement, and I think this is really important because this is how the I think that the traditional manufacturing and traditional parts of the industry are going to integrate with 3D printers. Where that's going to happen, and by printers I don't mean the things, I mean the people that are 3D printing, guns and in the gun space, and even gun makers in general. It's going to be traditionally manufactured parts that are specifically intended for and marketed to people who are printing frames or other parts, whether it's forends or stocks or grips or whatever it may be. So, imagine a gun company that has that isn't using an AR-15 pattern grip. They've got a more unique grip interaction with their gun. When they release a file, let's say, here's the file, guys. We're going to give you the file, and you can customize and put finger grooves or stippling or whatever you want on it. And you go to our website, and for $4.95, order the screw or the clip or whatever it is that attaches that plastic part that you printed to the gun that you buy from us. And you can only get that gun from us. So we know you're our customer, and we're excited to be part of your life and have you part of our, company. And we really haven't seen much of that yet. But I think that's kind of inevitable. In the
Interesting.
same way we could say, like with the gun kit makers, the people that are supporting this are still all aftermarket people as well, right? Like Glock isn't selling slides and lower parts kits to and marketing them to the gun building community that use these kits. But these are, 90% of the kits that are made, if not 98% of the kits that are made at this point, are Glock style, right? And they're taking Glock parts. They may have OEM parts, but if they have OEM parts, it's shipped from Glock with an OEM frame. We're really still seeing people like Patmos Arms selling aftermarket slides, which 10 years ago would have gone on a Glock, and maybe it had an optic cut or something that you wanted, or slide lightning cuts, or who knows what you wanted, the contours, the serrations. Now people are buying this with no intention of it ever touching a real Glock frame, but touching either a 3D printed or a kit build.
80% lower or something like that. So let's talk about 3D scanning, because I didn't realize this, and I guess it makes sense. You're not typically just going to take a part and say, okay, yeah, let me recreate this. You have to scan it, or you have to draw it out.
So
Right?
you can scan it. There's so many different methodologies. I do have a 3D scanner, but you're getting into this a bit into the weeds conversation of the file types, whether or not you're working with triangles in what's called a meshed model. If you're going to scan something, you're going to have something that is more, you're going to have to almost mold it like clay. Anytime you're working with these triangular meshed models that you get from a 3D scanner, it's like working with clay, where you're going to bend it and shape it and dimple it. Whereas most people are going to actually, like I do, I'm going to bust out my calipers. I'm going to actually take physical measurements. I'm going to draw it out, and I'm going to input the actual measurements, and I get something called a solid model. Solid models or step files are significantly more easy to share and edit than that of what are called STLs or mesh files. And that's, sorry if that's getting into the weeds there.
No, that's good. That I mean that I didn't realize that. It makes sense, right? And that's what I thought, because I know Rob, I reached out to you about some parts for a bench that I had that the wood's all rotten, and I wanted to
Yeah.
replace that with something. And I brought I brought it to SHOT Show and totally forgot to give it to you. But and
Yeah.
then I got thinking, like, how, how are you going to recreate that? And I assumed it would be a caliper and you'd measure the dimensions of it and everything, and plug all that into the computer. But then I was talking to somebody else recently at Eric's range day down in, IV 88 range day, 88 range day. And they were saying that there's the 3D scanning aspect of it. And that, it was the first time they said it. I'm thinking, well, that makes sense. You got a scanner to scan a piece of paper, and you got a printer to print what you just scanned. So it was interesting.
There's, I think what it comes down to, part of it, and certainly, John, I get your feedback, because for me, if I were going to scan something, having seen what happens when you open those files in the software, I'm only getting what I'm getting. So let's say I had a really good scanner and I was going to scan that thing that you wanted for those inserts on the back of that bench. I could get that 1-to-1 if I had a really good scanner. But what most of us like to do is mess with stuff, right? So if you're in the 3D, we want to put our logo on it, or we want to put our initials on it, or we want to put, we want to change the size of the grip or whatever it is. And so, like I happen to have here, this isn't a frame, this is a grip, right? And you put the SIG fire control unit in this. So this isn't technically the firearm, but this is actually like a plain Jane. This is how the file comes out. Right now, it's pretty rare for me not to have a Triquetra logo or something there, or change the feel, the contour of the grip. But this was just something I printed a few of these just to see how well the fire control unit actually fit in. And this is an unmolested, SIG scan. That could have been a scan. Most people in our community, they want to mess with it. So the files that get shared are files that are much easier to manipulate, and that's thanks to guys like Snow, because you can do all that. I'm not good at all that. I'm not much of an artist, and I'm not much of a detail guy. And you really need to be both creative and detail oriented in a weird way to do digital manipulation. How did you get started in that?
Honestly, YouTube videos. So I've never taken an engineering class. I've never had any like formal training at college level or anything like that. I've always been into guns, and my father got me into guns when I was very young. And about 6 years ago, I bought my first 3D printer on a complete whim off of some Amazon open box special. It was a junk printer. It's like $100, but I just bought it, and I thought I wanted to make props. So I was making these like gun movie props that I thought were cool. A bunch of stuff from Star Wars, a bunch of stuff from cool movies that I like. And then one day, I kind of discovered Defense Distributed out of Texas with Cody Wilson and the Liberator, the 3D printing of guns. And I said, hold on, I can actually take these prop guns that I like and make them functional. And so that's what I started doing. And I just learned how to do that all through within the communities. There's lots of different places to connect with groups of communities, and they will level you up. I've got a link tree out there. If you go out there and search the Mr. Snow Makes link tree, you'll go out there and you'll see a link to a bunch of those different communities, different places to get started.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So you just went right down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that was roughly about 3 years ago.
Wow.
And I was doing that just all on my own, just having fun. And I got deeper and deeper into the community. Kind of what really opened up myself to the public space was at the Gunmakers match. So the very first Gunmakers match was held in St. Augustine, Florida in 2020, I believe, or was it? Yeah, 2020. Yeah. And, a bunch of us showed up. I think there was like roughly in the neighborhood of around 60 shooters that were all using DIY guns in a competition setting.
Wow.
Guns that they made themselves.
That's cool.
And they came together. And it was super interesting to see, I'm meeting someone for the first time face to face, that I've only ever known them by a screen name and a logo. And I've been talking to this person for 6 months or a year, and suddenly I've got someone that I've had a deep relationship with and a shared passion that we're standing face to face.
kind of makes me think of like gamers, right? Like gamers, they'll be online doing a lot of this stuff back and forth, and then they meet in person, and it's like a love fest. You know, that's cool. That's really neat. And you know, the neat thing too, as you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, because you think like you shot the 50, right, Rob? And you're probably in the back of your mind and going, this might be the end of me if this blows up and pieces go flying through me like, you know, Kentucky ballistics. So, you know, I mean, but you got all these people going to this gun makers match where you're shooting all these guns, DIY guns, and nothing, right? And this what, second, third year? How many years has that happened?
We have the third one's actually going to be very close to Mr. Macro in Western Pennsylvania. We just announced the date for April 22nd. The second one was held this past March also down in St. Augustine in a different range. Now we're going to be at our third location, but we're shifting from Florida up to you know, I don't know, Western Pennsylvania. It's like half the Midwest, and it's also kind of the Mid-Atlantic. It's right where it needs to be. We've got a lot of people in the Midwest and in the Mid-Atlantic that do a lot of printing, and I think it's going to be easier for some of the West Coasters maybe to get there, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, you know, we're hosting Masad Ayub next week, and that actually this weekend coming up, and I'm heading down to Clint's, and that when we have it at Clint's, it's like, well, you know, it'll be okay. But yeah, you got it spot on. We got people flying in from Hawaii, coming from all over the country to this course that Moss is doing, the Deadly Force Instructor, and because of that positioning, because originally we had thought about hosting up here in New York, but that was a good location, Western PA.
One of the things that I think is important just to circle back to is the danger level, right? Because even in talking to the ranges about hosting the match, it's really important to understand and kind of put that in perspective, because I do think that's something people think about is like, oh, the gun's made of plastic, it's going to explode. You know, like I was saying, with that 50, the top end of that, right, is traditionally manufactured. You could put it on a regular AR lower. So the way that would fail, let's say that the you know, so I've got like you know, essentially this is obviously 223, 5.56, 223 wild, whatever it is, but essentially you got this as a 50 caliber. And then you print out the rest of it, right? So, you know, this would have to fail in a the rest of this would have to fail in a really weird way for this to be able to hurt me. And then remember that, yeah, this is an AR where this is going to be going back into the stock. The 50 is a bolt. So it's a self-contained unit. And even with the 3D printed or the you know, Glock style guns, you've got a traditionally manufactured slide and a traditionally manufactured barrel in 99.9% of all of these guns. It is possible to make your own barrel. Some designs do revolve around a homemade barrel. There's a process called electrochemical machining where you can rifle a barrel. You can do that. All that stuff is possible at home, but almost everything that's happening is using traditional barrels. In fact, even in what we call our fully printed division in the 3D printed, you know, in the gunmakers match, the fully 3D printed division, we stipulate that traditionally manufactured barrels and springs, just because it's hard to, you know, make your own springs at home, are allowed. So those can be gun parts that were intended for guns. And the main reason we do the barrel is for safety. We have had people use shotguns that use homemade barrels. Obviously, the pressure is a lot lower, and that's you know, we're not worried about that. We also have technical inspection stations. So we have guys like from these communities that Snow's talking about. We have guys that really know this stuff, you know, way better than me. Certainly, Snow could be one of our technical inspectors anytime, who go in there and they ask the right questions of the person who shows up with the 3D printed gun. You know, we could bore you with the, you know, infill and walls and layers, all that we don't, but they look at it first superficially and just see if there's any big problems. Then they ask some questions. And if the questions are answered right and everything looks good, they may dry fire it just operationally, but then we send the people out to the range, and we have had exactly zero problems in terms of safety. When it comes to kit builds, you know, this polymer is the same for all practical purposes as the polymer that's going to be on a Glock or a SIG or XD or whatever. So it's really hard. I think people get very who aren't in the space think of it as maybe a little bit more reckless or wild or uncontrolled than it is. It is possible that people can build guns in a way that they aren't structurally sound, and certainly, you know, people can get a black eye or, you know, get plastic bits in their arm or whatever. But most of the problems we see are very, very low level. I've had 3D printed guns that I made crack in my hand while I was shooting them, and I kind of finished the drill, with a cracked gun in my hand, and no big deal. And then it was, once I let go of it, the bottom end fell off of the grip. But it's not as dangerous as I think maybe some people outside of the community think. What do you say there, Snow?
No, I agree with you. I mean, as a traditional gun builder as well, I have a lathe and a mill, and I will build guns out of metal. If I don't headspace that properly when I'm building it, it's going to blow up. So, I mean, that safety element of whether it's 3D printed or a metal firearm, it is a firearm. There are risks involved, but it's going to be about risk mitigation. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you have good mentors that have walked you through those capabilities? Do you understand what head spacing is? Do you know what the risks are? Are you making informed decisions in good risk mitigation? You're never going to remove all the risks.
Yeah, it's guns at the end of the day.
It's kind of like, I mean, as you're saying that,
go ahead. Every single time I go to load up one of my muzzle loaders and I'm jamming a rod down the end to do a powder charge, or I've got a cannon. I built a cannon, and I've got a billiard ball cannon that uses 1.5 ounces of powder.
Just to clarify, you didn't print that.
No, but we actually have a 3D printed cannon out there.
Awesome.
It still uses some metal parts that you 3D print around the barrel, so that does exist.
That's cool.
But I mean, anytime I'm sitting there jamming metal down into 1.5 ounces of powder, I get nervous a little bit.
For sure.
Right, lean back, right?
Yeah, as you're saying this, it's making me think of kind of like reloading, right? If you're going to reload, I mean, it's good for certain people to do it. They have to be focused on it, not multitask, etc. Yeah, as you look back at your reloading bench, didn't you?
Well, I have 110 pounds of black powder sitting right next to me. So, I mean, that was kind of like if that went,
right.
Okay.
So it's a responsibility in everything we do, driving cars, etc. So for sure. All right. So let's take it from the top and talk about the three things that somebody would need if they want to get into it. Obviously, we have a 3D printer, and you guys are saying the Ender 3 is probably $200, and now they're up to the Ender 4 or 5. What are they at now?
Who knows?
Okay,
there's a lot different manufacturers. I think the Ender 3 is one of the baselines for the community.
Okay, but the Ender is a manufacturer makes that, right?
Creality is actually the manufacturer. Creality is the manufacturer. The Ender line of 3D printers is one of their product lines.
Gotcha. Okay, so Ender 3 would be a good entry point, and then they need the platform.
Yeah, so if we were going to talk about 3 levels of entry points in terms of a budget, the Ender 3 is probably one of the baselines in that $150 to $200 range. Okay. If you were to step up a little bit, I really like the Anycubic Viper, made by the company Anycubic. Just adds some features like automatic bed leveling and some other fancy stuff to it. And then you're probably going to get into the $1,000 range printers. It's the one that I have had the longest and the most success with. You get what you pay for. Is a Prusa Mark III S, which is actually made in Prague. So, and they ship them over here. They're fantastic.
Okay. So
I may try to visit. I'm going to be over there in like 3 weeks. I may try to visit the factory.
Come home with
that'd be cool.
Come home with a new printer.
I don't know about that. So I travel light when I'm over there. I'm going to put my vote out there because I actually want to get your feedback. I think from the experiences I've observed for novices, the extra $100 for the Ender 5 might be worth it. What do you think?
And that's where I would say, spend that extra money for something like the Anycubic Viper. I think those are selling for around $350, $400.
Oh, really? Okay, so that might be the better option.
Ballpark. And you're going to get a lot of those features built in that's they're really simple to use.
Okay. Maybe I'll look at that for my fourth printer. You may have just talked me into what my fourth printer is going to be.
No, that is what Mussy uses and recommends. So that's a big deal.
It is.
So the next portion or next component would be like the plastic medium, the actual ink, if you will, in a traditional printer. Is that going to be standard no matter what printer you have, or does each company have their own, ink cartridges, kind of like they have with regular printers?
They actually come in a spool, and it's very correct in to say it's a 1.75 millimeter diameter, almost thread, as Rob is holding one up there in the field of view. There's two predominant types of filament that are recommended. One is called a PLA plus. PLA plus. PLA stands for polylactic acid. It's an organic compound derived predominantly from corn, of all things, as opposed to something like an ABS plastic that's derived from petroleum products. But PLA plus is a very, very strong plastic, and that plus typically stands for an impact modifier. It's really good for this particular space and function. The creme de la creme of material, once again, you're gonna need to spend a little bit more money. It's gonna be a little bit more complicated to actually use and make good stuff, is those carbon fiber filled nylons, or even what I typically use is actually a glass filled nylon. A lot of your power tools, like any of your impact drills and stuff like that, that plastic that's around them, those are glass filled plastics, and they're incredibly strong.
Okay. And then
and
that's
actually even the polymers that we use in our gun manufacturing, there's glass, a percentage of glass in these as well. And it's something that the manufacturers tune.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that from the Glock Armors course, Glock Advanced Armors course. We talked about that. So, so it comes on a spool, and then you feed that spool into the printer. So the spools are independent of the printers. You could buy whatever spool or medium you want, feed it into
and you'll
whatever
learn
printer.
which ones work best with your printer,
Okay.
and what your budget is for that material.
Nice.
One way to think about a 3D printer feeding from that spool, and this is called FDM printing. There's many different types of 3D printer, but the most accessible is called fused deposited material, FDM, where you're extruding that material on basically what is essentially a hot glue gun on an XYZ axis. That's what a 3D printer is. Just a hot glue gun that's laying down layer upon layer of plastic in an XYZ axis. That's all it is.
Nice. I was thinking of a sewing machine when we were talking about a spool and but yeah, no, I like the hot glue gun. So hot glue gun sewing machine. I like it. Anyway.
Yeah, one of the things we say in the community is we make robots poop our guns.
I like that. And then the last thing would be the 3D files. And I guess that kind of goes into that question as, what to print. If somebody was going to get into this to do it as a hobby or fun, or maybe even, as a career down the road, what would be when I'm going to get my SOT? So I've been talking to other FFLs who have their class 2 and class 3 and saying, so what would be good guns to get on a budget for full auto, suppressed guns, et cetera. So that mindset, what could somebody possibly get in to just start doing it, tinkering around, not a lot of money, but to have some fun with 3D printing?
It's an open question, and the world is your oyster on this one.
Okay.
For a beginner, true beginner, I personally like, the 1022s are a very, very limited risk mitigation thing. A 1022 is quite easy to make in 3D printed space. Parts are very, very accessible. I think the Glocks and the ARs and AR-15, these are great options, as Rob was talking about earlier, because the barrel and the lockup, is still very traditional, all encased in metal. If they fail, it's probably going to fail in a very safe way. You're going to crack something, it's not going to work. It's not going to blow up in your face. And you just have to understand a little bit how firearms are registered and work in the United States. When it comes to an AR-15, I just need to buy the lower that holds the magazine and the trigger components. Everything else can be traditional. I just need to make the part that's registered. Same with a Glock. I just need to make the frame. Same with a 1022. I just need to print that receiver. Everything else is traditional parts that fit together.
Very cool. So it's some good options right there. What about the, I know that there's these back plates you can buy out of China to turn a Glock into a full auto. Is there a 3D file out there for that item?
I am
Don't
sure
answer.
there is. As an SOT, you can go and do that. Yeah, those things exist out there. But I mean, yes, there's, I don't know how deep you want to get into that. There are things out there called, there's a wonderful t-shirt that's made, and that t-shirt says, "Don't Google the Yankee Boodle.
True.
So you could
You don't
look
want
up
that
that
in your
picture.
history.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly.
It's not like that cup thing that was going around a few years ago, though. What just like we could take our ARs and drill the third hole, right, that we bought traditionally, you can run afoul of the law really quickly with 3D printing too. I think that's the biggest challenge, right, that we have in the community and have had for a long time, is that somehow there's this equivalency with, oh, you're 3D printing, you must want to have guns so the government doesn't know you have guns. I don't really know. I personally don't think I know anybody who 3D prints guns that doesn't own guns. Also, I don't think I know anybody who does kit guns who doesn't also own guns that they bought with background checks and 4473s. So the tie-in between, oh, so I could 3D print something that I can't buy isn't necessarily true in the sense of capabilities. Now, it's very true in the sense of things that just don't exist anywhere else. You have to 3D print some of these designs. A company called JSD Supply just recently ran a contest for designers. So they invited, it was the 2022 Invitational, they invited a bunch of designers to basically take one of their Patmos slides and a barrel. Like, they sent them a kit. They said, here's all the parts you got to use, and you come up with your best design for a handgun around these parts. And Snow was actually in the competition. And you saw probably, I don't know, 80% of what we saw was just a very traditional Glock, but stylized, right? A different stipple pattern, or a different, kind of a different accessory rail. I'll let Snow talk about what he did. The creativity was almost more just artistic than really gun design. Like, from me as an outsider, no, I wasn't participating because I'm not a designer in the 3D space, because I have no idea how CAD really works at the end of the day. I was like, kind of like, oh, well, you guys did different patterns, and one guy like had his sister paint the gun really nice or something. It was, but there were a couple guys who really did do unique designs that truly, like, that I've never seen that before. That's new. And the gun that won, I was really happy to see eventually that the gun that won the competition was truly a uniquely designed gun that happened to use Glock parts. It wasn't a Glock with a stipple pattern on it, or a Glock with a different contour. But Snow did something also very unique.
So I took my design. It was based off of Glock 19, and I put some pick rails actually on the side of the Glock up at the front, had a big belly that came off the front of the trigger guard, and I put a bunch of different attachments on it. Things like your Chick-fil-A sauce holders, or I had an Oreo dispenser on one side. I had a juice box mount on one side. And I've got some phenomenal high-speed slow-motion footage out there on my YouTube channel and Instagram of a miraculous failure that was just beautiful to behold, of a Chick-fil-A sauce coming out of that holder and all over me.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
Pretty epic. Think like slow motion, woman coming out of the water with her hair spray, all except Snow covered in sauce. But like that.
It's like that, but probably more beautiful.
Maybe some people. Also, someone in Prague. Yes, probably.
Very cool. Well, that's that's a wealth of information, gentlemen. I'm intrigued, and I think I might be looking into a 3D printer for my Christmas gift for my wife.
Well, and I got started by making trinkets and toys. I've got two kids that love to make stuff and express their art. I've got to deal with my kids. If you want to make something, the deal is you got to draw it out on paper first. Come up with a plan, and I'll help you make it real. And it's a great tool to bring up the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to spark ingenuitive kids and ingenuity. Yeah, I mean, that's anything like that where they see it and they want to do it, even if it's for a short period of time. They've got that experience, that background in it. And who knows, it might open up to a career that they love. And as we know, you have a career you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
I went to go get a prop. So this is my 7-year-old's 3D printer.
Wow.
This ties into her phone, and she can pick a toy and Wi-Fi, send it to this thing. She changes the spools just like we do on our big boy printers. And she hasn't done any guns, but she's done all kinds of cats and dogs and wolves and all kinds of toys for her friends she makes, takes them to school and gives them away. So when you were talking about that, the involvement of the kids is
That's cool.
And it is, frankly, it is absolutely the future. I fully believe one day we are all going to have 3D printers in our home. It's crazy, but it truly is. That's going to happen. Additive manufacturing in home is going to happen.
And I have a couple of stories. I have made some of those. Oh, that broke. Let me see if there's a file for it. And in fact, the first thing I made off of the 3D printer that was like a useful household item. It was during, I got mine first one in the fall of COVID year, right? And it was cookie cutters, because there was no cookie cutters for sale in any of the stores, and I needed some for my daughter's Christmas cookies. So I 3D printed them.
Were they any guns? 3D printed cookie?
They were like Christmas trees and snowmen, candy canes.
I would have.
So you can check out a website called Thingiverse. Thingiverse with an I is probably one of the most prolific for just getting started and finding those things that other people have uploaded. I think 99% of it's free. If you're more into the 2A interest of firearms, I mentioned my link tree earlier. There's links to places like the Control Pew Guide, as well as some of those groups of designers that you can get involved with, get in contact with, and make some friends that would love to teach and bring you into the space and open up a world of possibilities that the 3D printers bring.
That's cool. And another industry that I've been in off and on for like 15 years is the ham radio, right? Amateur radio. And that also is kind of that, that same mantra, that tight knit group of people that, a lot of techie stuff. And then when they meet finally in person, it's kind of neat. So awesome. Well,
call numbers and
call signs.
Stories.
Right, exactly. For sure. From around the world, right? Awesome. Well, John, it's been great having you on. How can people learn more about you, follow you, stalk you, that kind of stuff?
Well, as I mentioned, I'll kind of plug it again. That link tree is a great way to do it. But if you just pop into your search engine of choice, Mr. Snow Makes, I come up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm all over the place, and I'm just having a good time and just bringing people along, showing them what I am doing. There's an old phrase that I use a lot that says, people will call you lucky, and luck is nothing more than the intersection where skill meets opportunity. So if you build up enough skills, when the opportunity comes and you're the guy that has the skill to meet that opportunity, you're going to be the lucky one.
Nice. Very well said. Rob, any closing words?
That's it. Come meet Mr. Snow at the 3rd annual Gunmakers match in Western Pennsylvania. It's going to happen on Saturday, April 22nd. You can learn more about it at gunmakersmatch.com. It is brought to you by Guns for Everyone National. Registration is open, and you can do it with a kit build. We have 2 divisions: the 3D printed, which we've been mostly talking about tonight, and then the kit building, which is your 80% type kits. Very easy to do. We're actually going to be running a class at Mr. Macro's school, the Trigger Presser headquarters. We're going to be running a class on Thursday evening for people that want to do their builds first time with supervision in a controlled kind of fun space. Very cool. People can enter the competition and compete on Saturday. We've run a lot of regional events, small pistol only gun makers events, where the match was held on Sunday, and on Saturday we did the build day. So people built their gun and shot it. We actually had we had several people build their first kit gun ever and then compete the next day. We've actually had 2 people who built the first gun they've ever owned at one of those build days for the gun makers match. We had one person build the first gun she ever shot.
Wow.
And we had one person who built their first gun. The other person had shot before, but she built a gun and then competed with her first gun. But I thought it was pretty cool to have a teenager there with her parent make the first gun she ever shot as a gun she made. It's locked up in a safe, and when she's old enough, that'll be hers.
Well, I'll definitely be adding it to my calendar, and if it meets my schedule, definitely I'll be out there. Never miss heading out to Western PA and hang out with Clint and all you guys. So, well, gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate it. Rob, way people can follow you?
On the internet. I'm on the internet,
Rob
man.
Pincus.
Yeah,
If If you don't
They'll
know
find
Rob, then there's an issue.
I don't know about that, but if you watch this and you're like, who is this guy? Go
Really,
to Google, you'll find
yeah.
me. Yeah.
Google. Very unique name for sure. Well, this is Meet the Pressers. Thanks for watching, listening, and we'll see you around next time. Hey, Clint, I like that shirt. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners about that shirt? It's a pretty darn good shirt right there.
That's a nice shirt. Nice shirt. Actually, this shirt was your idea, was it not?
I think it was.
Yeah.
I do declare. Eclair. I'm hungry. I was say lunchtime. But yes, yeah. I do declare.
Well, people can get a shirt just like this if they go on to our Ballistic Inc. Meet the Pressers page.
You got it.
Yeah, and you can get a shirt like this or the one like you're wearing too.
Yep.
Yeah, you can sport your Meet the Pressers logoed gear and be the coolest kid on your block.
As well as we have Trigger Pressers Union and PS&Ed memorabilia or shirts, merch for you to pick up too.
And you'll shoot your eye out, kid. Your other shirt design.
Yes, the other shirt design. So it's got Daisy Red Ryder BB gun. I love my fully semi-automatic assault rifle. Don't shoot your eye out. Pick it up.
There's a lot of sponsors to make this show possible, like Mantis.
Make sure you check them out and give them your business.
This episode is brought to you by Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training, the makers of the SIRT pistol. TheGunFood.com, your online source for ammunition. Mountain Man Medical, the right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening to our show.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share. Click that little bell thingy so you know when the next episode's uploaded. Support us on Patreon. Come to one of our classes. Host us to come to you and do one of our classes at your location.
And until next time,
adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.